lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand, who is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and runs away. And the wolf snatches them and scatters them. The hired hand runs away because a hired hand does not care for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that do not belong to this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock, one shepherd. For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life in order to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have the power to lay it down, and I have the power to take it up again. I have received this command from my Father. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise you, Lord Christ.
You may be seated. I grew up on a ranch in central South Dakota. My dad had 2,000 acres of land. A large part of that was pasture land because he had 100 head of cattle. And so in the late spring, when it was time to bring in the cattle, my brother and my father and I would each get our horses. We had Cuba and Dixie and Shorty. And my brother and I would have to switch with Shorty and Dixie because Shorty was a quarter Shetland and it's smaller, so, you know, there was an ego thing involved there. But Dixie was a great horse and she was fast. And you could ride her all day long, but when you turned her head toward the barn, hang on, because you were going to go until you got into the barn. You hung onto that saddle like for dear life because that's what was going to happen. But we would round up the cattle, and I entitled my sermon, Herding versus Shepherding. So we were herding the cattle. We would get behind them with our horses, gather them all up, crack the whip, shout and yell, and get them going in the right direction. So herding is to stand behind the flock or the herd or whatever, and to drive them in the direction you want them to go. I grew up understanding what herding meant. But I got a new understanding of shepherding when we lived in Africa. The Mbororo people, the nomadic cattle people, who wandered with their animals because when the rains would stop, they would have to then wander with their cattle down to where the rains were still going on for the food. And I learned what shepherding was, because the Mbororo herder would be in front of the herd, calling them to follow. He wasn't behind them, chasing them, the direction, but was in front of them. And as I would watch them, and they would go through the bush, the high grass, and the trees and the forest gallery there, and I would see the shepherd in the front, and he would be calling, and the cattle all followed, and the goats and the sheep. And I understood then that shepherding was to lead, and herding is to drive. And I've always tried to use that same philosophy in ministry. In working in the church, rather than crack the whip and order the people to do what you want to do, you get further when you say, well, come on, let's go do this together. That's what shepherding is. So I want you to keep that image in your mind as we look at Jesus as the Good Shepherd. What kind of shepherd is he? And what does it mean that he's a shepherd? In our text a few weeks ago, Mary is walking back from the empty tomb. She has encountered Jesus at the tomb. And her mind is just all jumbled up with all these thoughts. She's got images, she's got things that she saw that she doesn't understand. She's wondering, what has just happened? I saw him alive, then I saw him dead, now I see him alive again. What happened here? Who is this teacher that I've been following and traveling with? Jesus had healed Mary, and now he appears to her and she encounters him, and then he tells Mary to go and tell the others what she has seen. And those friends have the same question. What is this all about? What does that mean? That he was alive, then he was dead, and now he's alive? We don't get it. But earlier, Peter calls Jesus the Messiah, the Son of the living God. But did he know what that meant? Or understand Messiah, Son of the living God? Did he understand that this was the one who would lay down his life for the world? That this is the one who was willing to suffer and to die for the world and be raised from the dead? So this is our fourth Sunday after Easter, and we shift from the events of what happened, and now we focus more on a reflection about what happened, to think about what is this all about? Not what happened, but why things happened. Like Mary and the disciples, we want to understand better what took place and why it took place. And we want to be the flock who follows that good shepherd. All followers of Jesus are trying to find images that they can use or words that they can use to describe Jesus so that they can grasp a little bit about who he was and what he did. To say who Jesus is helps us understand who he really is and how he plays out his role as Son of God. In John's first chapter, he talks about the creation, and he uses an image. The Word made flesh. The Word made flesh. So we can think of other images or words that are used to help us understand Jesus. For instance, I'm the vine, you're the branches. Get that image? Attached? Growing because you're attached to the vine? Or he says, I'm the bread of life. What does that mean? I am living water. Not just water, but living water. And now we have a new image. I am the shepherd. The shepherd is one of the earliest images of Jesus that was painted on frescoes in the church and in tombs. Jesus, the good shepherd. And you've probably seen this picture. You know, the only thing I don't like about the old picture is that it's really a white Jesus instead of a Palestinian Jesus. But the shepherd with the lamb on his shoulder, you've all seen that. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. What does that mean? I know my own, and my own know me. What kind of shepherd is this? And what kind of a flock are we to be with that shepherd as our shepherd? So think about sheep in a moment for that in the culture of that time. Everyone was connected to sheep. Everyone knew about sheep. Even if they weren't shepherds, they knew what sheep were all about. They watched the shepherds who took care of the sheep. They knew that the sheep had to be led from the pen to the pasture. They drank the milk of the sheep. They used the milk to make cheese. They ate the sheep. And even more importantly, they used the sheep as religious rituals. Remember in Egypt, how is it that the Passover took place? The blood of the lamb is over your doorpost, and you can then be free from death. Every year they celebrated the Passover, so everyone knows about sheep. Jesus does not describe what a good shepherd does or will do. He claims that he is that good shepherd. He doesn't describe it. He just says, I am the good shepherd. And maybe his listeners were kind of taken back by that. What does that mean? I am the good shepherd. They all knew what shepherds were. What does it mean to be the good shepherd? Lots of images in the Old Testament. We read Psalm 23. Anything more popular than Psalm 23 about the shepherd? The Lord is my shepherd. A loving picture of a caring God shepherd who loves the sheep, provides food, comfort, shelter, and safety. The sheep of God's pasture. And God said, I myself will search for my sheep and will seek them out. I myself will search for my sheep. I know my sheep, God says, and my sheep know me. So then how can Jesus claim to be the shepherd? Unless he's claiming he is God. If God is the shepherd, and Jesus says, I am the good shepherd, he's claiming that he's God. And what is Jesus saying to those Pharisees standing nearby who keep challenging Jesus? Tell us who you are. Who are you? What are you doing? Why do you do this? Who gives you authority to do this? Chasing him out of the temple, driving him away. And then he heals a blind man once he leaves the temple. And if that isn't bad enough, he healed the blind man. He did it on the Sabbath. And so they're really upset. Is Jesus accusing the Pharisees of being blind, maybe? And if a sheep is lost, does the shepherd say, oh no, I can't look for it now, it's the Sabbath? Or does the shepherd go looking for the sheep, even on a Sabbath? So Jesus describes the divine sheepfold, the flock. One must enter into the sheepfold. One must enter into it. One must come there to be cared for, to be protected, to be fed. One comes to be free of bandits and wolves. And a shepherd is willing to lay down his life for his sheep because he loves his sheep. And he uses the example of a hired hand. A hired hand will not die for the sheep because he's just a hired hand. And he says, these aren't my sheep. I'm not giving up my life for these sheep. They're not mine. Only the shepherd, whose sheep they are, is willing to give up his life for the sheep. The hired hand runs away. I wonder if Jesus is pointing a finger at the Pharisees as hired hands, those who are not really there for the sheep. Not only does the shepherd give up his life, he gives it up willingly. It looked to us like Jesus was captured and executed by the authorities. Not so. He gave up his life. Instead of being caught and murdered, he sacrificed. There's a difference. And what does it mean to be a sheep of his flock? We enter into the gate, and we are assured of our salvation, the promise of God's love, his grace. We know that voice. Sometimes we even hear that voice. We know that he cares for us, that we're always accepted, we're never excluded. And even, good news for all of us who have children who might have wandered away, even when the sheep wanders away, the shepherd goes searching for the sheep. Good news. We love being included in the flock. But there's one more big, challenging thought. The good shepherd decides who is in the sheepfold, not us. It's the shepherd who decides who's in the sheepfold. And Jesus makes this provocative statement. I have other sheep that are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. I have sheep that are not of this flock. I have to have them too, because I love them also. And then he says, so there will be one shepherd and one flock. No divisions, no exclusions, one shepherd and one flock. The Pharisees thought they were the ones who knew who was going to be in the flock, in the sheepfold, because they had the law. You're in, you're out, you did this, you're out, you're in, you're out. And there are places in our world today where some people think they know who is in the sheepfold and who is not. And it's a surprise. Jesus says, there are others who are not in this flock that I have to have too. No exclusions. Because there will be one flock and one shepherd. Man, that's a great statement. That Jesus says, I have to have all of the sheep in my sheepfold. It is not God who decides who is in the sheepfold. It's not us who decide who is in the sheepfold. It's God. And according to this, God says everyone is in the sheepfold. Even those who don't actually know that they belong, they do. We come together as a flock because our shepherd has brought us together. And we have lots more room